This episode is sponsored by Linode. Do you need a Linux server for your latest creation? Then check them out. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit per second network connections, Intel E5 processors, and top-of-the-line hardware to run your servers on. It deploys Linux in seconds from a Linode cloud, and you can choose your Linux distribution and node location right from the manager. They have locations in Asia, North America, and Europe, and a sweet set of tools to make it easy to manage it. If the web interface isn't your thing, they also have an API and a command line. They also provide two-factor authentication, IPv6, DNS manager, plumbing, scaling, and everything else you would want. So get the most out of your Linux node by checking them out at linode.com or devchat.tv/linode. Hello and welcome to React Native Radio, episode 82. I'm your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our panel, we have Mike Grabowski of CallStack.io.
Hello, everyone.
And our special guest today is Mike Chudziak, also from CallStack.io. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hello.
Yeah, definitely really good to have you on. It's a topic that we have really been wanting to cover for a while now, and that topic is universal applications. And I know that you've been kind of doing a lot of stuff in this space. I saw that you had a really good talk not too long ago, and I downloaded the slides, and I'm actually writing a blog post kind of based on some of the information you gave in those slides, and I really got a lot out of it. But yeah, so the topic today is going to be basically universal applications. So we're really looking forward to having you on and talking about that.
I'm looking forward for it too.
So can you give us like a quick introduction of what you do right now as far as your day-to-day job and how you work with React Native?
Yeah, so basically I'm a full stack developer focusing now mainly on React Native because I just finished some cross-platform application. But in my previous project, I was like focusing more on creating reusable components between web and native and yeah, just optimization of the productivity and actually code which I'm developing that to make it as reusable as possible between the platforms. So I think it will be like really good to talk about it, given that today's topic is Universal React.
So can you kind of give a quick overview about what Universal React is, if someone might be listening and they don't really know of the concept or kind of like what that means?
Mm-hmm. So what I think Universal React is the creation of some components or some logic or any other thing that can be reused between the web and mobile versions of React. There are many libraries which can help you achieve it, and basically that's it. Yeah. So I guess just to start the conversation off in general, what kind of customers or what kind of people in general, I guess, are looking for this type of application, and is it kind of a real viable solution? Because I know for a long time, there's always been this discussion of sharing code across the web and on native, or when I say a long time, I'm really kind of speaking back to the Cordova days, and now we're here with React Native, and we're talking about a similar paradigm but a different platform. But how realistic is it to actually kind of ship an application that does this? Yeah, so it's quite realistic, but you have to remember the differences between the platforms and try not to create the universal code base for any platform which you target. So you cannot create 100% reusable code between the web and mobile, but you can share something. Yeah. So if it's 50% or 20% or 80%, it all depends on the project and on the requirements which are provided by the client.
Yeah, as far as clients, like from our company experience, I think that the inquiries that we've been getting so far were actually from all different sort of companies. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, startups that were talking to us, they had pretty much nothing. Like they just had like idea. So we had a lot of freedom, right?
True that. But also the larger companies are investing their resources into this kind of projects. So
so for larger companies, that's way more interesting because you have the legacy code and some JS code base, and you have
to think about the way to migrate it somehow. Yeah.
So if someone wanted to kind of get started doing this, what would they need to do? Do they need to just kick off like a React Native app, or would they start with like create React app, or like what would that look like, I guess?
So during one of my workshop, I was showing the setup of this kind of application. So we weren't using just React Native init and create React Native app. Then we was replacing the React Native Metro bundler with whole, and tried to reuse also some Webpack configurations. So this is basically what we do at the beginning, and then we have this kind of boilerplate to work on to extend your application.
So is the application, the React Native app and the Create React app, they're both in like the same folder, or are they in like separate folders, or how does that kind of look?
Now, actually, we had this structure of Android, iOS, and web folders, which contains the platform specific files, like in React Native, but with addition of the web folder, and also the SRC folder, which contains the shared logic. Or in a different kind of approach, we have the shared folder with the application with the components which can be reused, and in web and native folders we have React Native and React application, just taking out some parts of the code from the shared folder. So it depends on the project and what exactly we want to achieve. So
at the beginning you said about the reusable code and the fact that you can actually write universal code that is 100% on all the platforms. So could you kind of go a bit deeper into that topic? Because I feel like with the universal React code, there is that danger of creating something that looks bad on Windows, on Android and iOS and all the other platforms, right? Because like, what can I do to share my code as much as possible, at the same time make it look, let's say, okay for the platform?
Yeah. Okay, so starting from the platform differences, even in React Native itself, you have Android and iOS, and the platforms are way different. And sometimes you have to create the Android or iOS file, or just have the different approach for some component or some part of the code. When web actually joins this kind of stack, you have way different environment there. Everything is different in browser than it is in React Native, and the goal is to rather follow the platform patterns, and if you can come up with something with the similar API with the same API actually for any platform, then you are creating universal component, and it doesn't matter if in example it's exactly the same code, or if it's like one component in 3 different files with different extensions. But for me, in example, universal component is something which contains the same API for any platforms and results in similar look. So that's the thing. But as I said, sometimes maybe it's worth not to do this and rather think if it's achievable on the 3 platforms or no. If not, then try not to force it. And that's my advice.
Okay. And in terms of the things that you shouldn't do, are there any things that from your experience ended up being like bad choices for reusing? Or maybe what did you decide to skip?
Okay, not to rewrite.
Yeah.
Basically, some kind of components went like looking way different in the web and in mobile, but from the coding side, because we've seen some view, it was like a bit similar. Then we was thinking if we should create a universal component for that, and it turned out that no, we shouldn't. So we kept it in the platform specific versions. So I don't know if there is something that I can say no, never do that. Rather think about it and do it smart.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So one more question that I have is about the navigation, of course.
Uh-huh.
So with the navigation, there is React Navigation, of course. That is a JS solution and has the web and mobile versions, as well as React Router that can be run on mobile. So would you suggest rather going with this sort of universal navigation library, or maybe to kind of make these two separate and go with, like, I don't know, maybe native navigation on mobile and something that works perfect on web?
Okay, that's a good question, because I didn't want to say that no, never do the same navigation for web and mobile, because I prefer the native navigation on React Native and using some navigation library, whichever you want for web. Then going for the React navigation and having the same API everywhere, because in my opinion, it doesn't work that good. But I don't want anyone to not to use it because of, I don't know, just because of that reason. If you like it and you think it's good and it fits you better because it has simple API and it's easy to use, and you don't care if your transition is like perfect animation at 60 frames per second, then go for it. And it's just a matter of requirements. Because in example, I believe you will waste more time setting up native navigation on mobile and some other kind of navigation on web than you to use React navigation. Yeah. So it all depends on what you want to achieve, I think. But for like better quality apps, I would suggest going natively on navigation.
So I guess with the web stuff, like what would you like? I guess I'm kind of confused about how you would do navigation. Then are you saying that you would kind of not try to handle the navigation in a cross-platform way? You would use like a native navigation library for iOS and Android, and then you might use something like React Router for web, and then strictly use the universal components as just components themselves. So something like only use things like buttons and UI elements for the universal application, or is there a way to handle navigation in a cross-platform way?
I believe that's what React Navigation is for, to handle it in cross-platform way. But as I said, I'm not the big fan of it. So when creating universal application, I'm rather focusing on creating some kind of universal components, maybe some logic, in example, some reducers which can be reused, some other modules, but not really navigation. But I know that some people are the fans of React Navigation and this universal approach for this one. So.
Okay, so I think if I'm hearing you correctly, there's almost like two separate ways to create a universal application. One is to kind of go all in and actually handle everything, including navigation, including like just everything being consistent on the mobile web as well as the native app. And then there's another way to kind of think about it is just creating as many reusable components and as many reusable data architecture components as well. And then not trying to squeeze things like navigation that really are platform specific and try to not really squeeze those into both platforms, but kind of take advantage of what works well on native and what works well on web, and then things that are not kind of able to fit into those boxes, kind of then move those things into the universal maybe folder that you have your reusable components in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think that you are correct, and from my personal experience, I would suggest going with the approach where we start from the leaf parts of your system, which is the components, because like I've seen many apps and I've seen many boilerplates that end up being like a huge one single code base for all the platforms, and that is very hard to maintain long term. Not only because all the things are changing, like dependencies of the web, of React Native, of mobile, they can even have conflicts, with each other. So if you start structuring your project around a very clever architecture where all these platforms can share code, but don't have to, so it's not a must, it's a feature, then I think you are pretty much set, and it's just a matter of choosing whether this particular component it makes sense to share it from the business perspective and from the development perspective. So that's what I would suggest from my perspective and experience working on these platforms, to kind of try doing small steps first, and once you get settled, start looking for the bigger parts of the system.
What about if someone is kind of also considering a desktop application, as far as not like a desktop native, but like a desktop web application? Would this be something that they could also use some of their universal application? Because in my mind, I'm thinking what I would probably want to do this with is to have like two code bases. One of them would be a desktop version, the other would be a mobile version, and I would try to make the mobile version work well on web, iOS and Android, and maybe Windows Phone or whatever. And then I would have my desktop web application kind of be responsive. So if someone's like at 900 pixel width or greater, then I show them one view, which is the desktop app. And then if they're below that, I might then show them the mobile application. Would a universal application be able to handle desktop, or is this strictly something that's mobile only?
I believe if you are creating these small universal pieces, like components and logic and stuff like this, then yes, then you can use it anywhere. Maybe you will have to adjust it a bit. Maybe you will have to take care of some other things, or not to take care of them, because it all depends on use case. But if you are starting from those small pieces and working on them, then they can be reused basically anywhere. I believe that you can even create something which will be used in terminal with React Blast or something like this. So
that's what I suggested at first. Like, if you structure your code base correctly, then adding another platform is just a business decision that doesn't actually have an impact on what you have. Because if you couple your code to mobile and web, and then 1 year down the road, your team wants to launch for, like, I don't know, for tvOS, or maybe like
or React VR.
Yeah, something totally crazy that has a different paradigm and doesn't even have a navigation stuff.
Yeah.
Then the fact that you're sharing navigation is only your limitation that kind of requires refactoring. So
exactly.
That's awesome. That's interesting too. That really clears it up for me a lot, because I was there's always these few questions that I have, and I've had a few clients and people that have kind of asked my opinion on this, and I've only attempted this, I think, once or twice, and both times we ended up going with just a universal like folder, kind of like what you're saying, but we didn't try to squeeze the navigation at the time, and we just also kind of agreed that React navigation wasn't the best option. So we didn't want to kind of try to use that. So we ended up with just something like React Router on the web, and then whatever navigation library on iOS and Android. And then we would just have more like our whatever components we could kind of squeeze in as a reusable component, things like UI elements and things like Redux and things like that. So.
Yeah, I might have another question in terms of development and adding platforms. It's good that you never mentioned adding a desktop app later down the road. I was thinking, like what would be your advice, or like how do you see this? Like, what are the benefits and drawbacks of adding a platform? Because many developers these days with React Native that I see, they do iOS apps first. They all have Macs, they run their apps on iOS, and then just weeks before the launch, everyone checks Android and is like, oh man, this doesn't look even close to any other Android app. So what would be your advice and your observations on this topic, whether to start all the platforms at once, or maybe just do them in serially, and what are the drawbacks of this approach?
Yeah, so I believe there is a point when the percent of the code you share, it starts becoming your enemy rather than your friend, basically what we just said before, my advice is to divide and conquer this kind of topics. So if you have like 3 platforms at the beginning and you are thinking that, maybe in the future I will add some additional platform like Windows Phone or whatever, then keep it in the mind and design your architecture smartly, because it will all pay off at the end. And just try to use the fact that you can reuse the stuff between the platforms as your friend, and try not to let it overcome you and your project.
Okay.
So I guess if someone wanted to get started with building their first universal app, are there any resources out there for them to kind of take a look at? I know I mentioned your slide deck. I think that's a really good resource. I forgot where that's located, but just if someone wanted to kind of get started with this, what would you recommend them as far as resources are concerned?
Yeah, so as always, when it comes to React or React Native development, I can recommend the blog.callstack.io. There are many articles, and I think something will be covering the universal development. If not, I will try to write down something real soon. But also there is our GitHub, and there is MindTalk, who did you just mentioned. And also there is a boilerplate to use. And I think any other resources, maybe the documentation of React XP, or dig around, try to search for React Native Web, React Primitives, React XP, and I believe there are many articles over the web who can make this topic a little bit clearer for you.
Yeah, we haven't really even gone, I guess, into some of these other platforms like you mentioned, React XP, React Native Web, and React Primitives. Let's quickly go over those 3 just to kind of give listeners an idea of what they are. So just start, I guess, with React XP, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so React XP is, I believe, the library developed by Windows, who is designed to create really cross-platform apps for iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and for web as well. I have to admit that I didn't use it in production. I only had the chance to play with it. But it seems like a really solid tool, so definitely worth checking out. The second one is React Primitives. So I'm actually a bit sad because I know that this library is not very maintained at the moment. When I was creating my workshop, I had to do some tweaks because it was the moment when React 16 got released and many things got changed, and React Primitives wasn't working very, very well for me then. And I just checked, and they still depend on React 15 something. So if you don't care about the latest release of React and you are fine with React 15 and some older version of React Native, then React Primitives are really a good tool to use. But also they depend on the third solution we have, React Native Web, which is just a set of components for the web. with the same API as React Native has. So you can basically just create an alias in your web from React Native to React Native Web and use and write the same code as you would write in React Native.
I guess would the process be different if you were building an app with React primitives or React Native Web, or would it be kind of similar to what we talked about so far?
I think it will be similar because, like, I can imagine that setting up React Native Web in a correct way would help you achieve basically the same things that you would achieve with React primitives and with React XP as well. But React XP, I guess, is a bit different there because you have the different CLI. You're using their CLI to initialize the app, and also you have the Windows support, which React primitives or React Native Web doesn't give you.
Does your company provide, do you do development right now, I guess, with clients doing universal applications?
Yeah, I think we have some of the projects which contains the code bases for web and mobile. Actually, even I am working with the guys who have React Native app, and they have their Node module with the components which they use also in their web page. And also I'm using it while developing their app. So I guess it gets pretty popular, this kind of approach.
Yeah, we got like a lot of requests from our clients. Pretty much every time they do reach out to us, this topic comes up, in terms of like, to what degree I can share my existing web React app and kind of get it mobile. My personal belief that I'm kind of trying to like advertise everywhere is that like a lot of people, especially from web, are coming to React Native because of React, and so that's a natural question that arises every time we are talking about the project. So as Mike mentioned, we have a lot of them. The number obviously changes every month because we are rotated across different clients and projects on a kind of monthly basis. But, I would say that we've been observing an increased interest recently. So I feel like as React Native matures, the more people will look into kind of using it and kind of benefiting from the native thing that React Native can actually offer you.
All right. Well, with that, I think it's a good time to go ahead and get to the picks. Mike G, do you have any picks for us today?
Actually, I don't have any link to share. Just two cool things that I wanted to mention. The first one is that I've been recently playing around with Flutter and Kotlin, and I really encourage everyone on the React Native community to go beyond the React ecosystem, JS ecosystem, and look into these alternatives because they are pretty fun. We can actually learn a lot from them, from the different concept that they have and their perspective onto the sharing mobile code. And the other thing which will no longer be relevant when this podcast is probably being published is the React Native RC version that I'm trying to publish right now, which is 0.51. Recently, we've been working quite a while on Circle C. I set up migrating from 1 to 2, and quite a few things broke. So we are trying to get it green again and up and running, but it's not an easy thing. So I've been unable to release an RC version for the past 2 weeks because of these failures. So I'm really hoping to do it, before this podcast gets published. So in case you are listening to this and the RC is not yet out, that means we kind of are still fighting, but I'm hoping that this won't be long.
All right, Mike, do you have any picks?
So as Mike already mentioned, the Kotlin example, and this is the perfect example, I would say, to show that maybe higher percent of sharing is not always better. So this one thing to remind, and also I recommend you to check out the repos I mentioned. So React XP, React Native Web, and React Primitives.
So regarding the Kotlin example, is that just basically writing an Android app using Kotlin and using the existing Android APIs? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Not really, because Kotlin native just got released, and you can write some maybe apps, I would say, some code in Kotlin which will be run on iOS and Linux and some other kind of environments. So this is one thing, and also there is Kotlin JS, I guess. So they have the different approach, but I know that it would be possible to, in example, write Kotlin code, which will be good for both Android, iOS, and for the web as well.
Okay, great. Maybe we'll have to do a show actually on that soon. That sounds cool. Okay, my picks are, the first one is 2 blog posts about React Native and iPhone X. One of them is from me on my Medium blog. And then the other is actually from someone also from CallStack, Raul Gomez Acuna. And he goes into a little more depth about integrating React Native with iPhone X. So if you have any interest in that, there's 2 pretty good blog posts there. And then my last pick is AWS Amplify. It's from the AWS mobile team. It's kind of a way to integrate some of the cloud-based solutions from AWS mobile into React Native. They have a React Native SDK, and they also have a JavaScript SDK. So it's at GitHub/AWS/AWS-Amplify. It allows you to do things like analytics and authentication and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. It's really easy to get started with. All right. Well, Mike, thank you for coming on to the show today. I think we covered a lot in a pretty good short amount of time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's been a while since the last time I joined the podcast, but I'm kind of planning to make it better and hoping to join the following episodes as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you're welcome anytime, both of you, actually.
Yeah, I would like to thank. It was my first time in podcast, but I'm looking forward to join you in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You did a really good job too, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have to say that as a first time doing podcast, it's been pretty great. Like I remember my first time, I was like, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, when we just started, I was so stressed, but then when we started talking, actually, it was all good. So
good.
I think that other podcasts are one of the. Actually, your podcast is the only one that I've ever joined, but I have to tell you that it's kind of nice formula because the recording itself is just like a conversation. So, so maybe a reach out to all the listeners listening to this podcast right now. If you have any topic to talk about that you'd like to share, please join, because this is just like a conversation that you might have on regular days. So
true that.
it's pretty relaxing and
cool,
fun stuff.
All right. Well, this episode will be out next week, and thank you for listening. And again, we'll see everyone next week.
See ya.
Right, cool.
See you.